Hi, and welcome to Hypnotize Me, the podcast about hypnosis, transformation, and healing. This is Dr. Elizabeth Bonet. Today's interview is with John Clarke of the Private Practice Workshop, as well as Unconditional Media. Those are two of his companies. So we talk some about his experiences with that and his experiences working with clients. He still works with clients in his private practice in North Carolina. And then also how he uses those skills in his work with clinicians growing their own private practices. So the conversation varies quite a bit. We talk about quite a few different topics like stuttering and the difference between meditation and hypnosis and some of his experiences with that. After the interview ended, John offered a discount code to my listeners for his new company. So make sure you listen to the end of the interview to get that discount code. I think he's offering a really good product here. So make sure you grab that if you're interested. All right, let's jump in. Hi, John. Welcome to Hypnotize Me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Let's jump in with the question that I ask most of my guests, which is, what was your first personal experience with hypnosis?
Yeah, it's a sentimental one. When I was an undergraduate studying psychology, I went to school in Virginia at a public university called James Madison University. And there was a professor who was kind of toward the end of his career, but he had a long career doing psychotherapy as well. And he was kind of an eccentric dude. He was kind of out there. He had a ponytail and wore a lot of strange jewelry and was just, he was just a real character. So he was also like the perfect person to be talking about hypnosis and talking about techniques that for some people are kind of out there. And I went to like a special workshop with him or something, and he talked in depth about how he received hypnosis when he was a child because his stutter was so bad. When he would speak, when he was learning to speak, he would be in the middle of a sentence or trying to pronounce a word, and his father would interrupt him or do something like say in the middle of him trying to speak. I don't know why a father would do that, but he did. And he created a really, troubling pattern of a speech impediment, basically, and stuttering that progressed all the way through, I think, his early adulthood. And he told his story about that. And even hearing the story was very hypnotic. And of course, he had an amazing and has an amazing voice for hypnosis as well. So everything about the story and the way he told it and the words he used was just put me into my own trance. And that's how I first took interest in it.
Interesting. So he had hypnosis then as an adult for the stuttering or as a child?
I think both, when he was a child and when he was an adult, and then he started using clinical hypnosis for his work as well. But I think it wasn't until like maybe later childhood that he was successfully treated after attempts with a lot of other methods to treat the stuttering and the speech impediment. So
I had my youngest stuttered like between the ages, she was really little. Right around like 4 or 5, she developed this stutter where she couldn't get a word out. There's different types of stuttering. And we had to slow our speech down. Like,
sure.
We used to speak like very quickly in our family. But a lot of her treatment was actually how I spoke, right? And how my ex-husband spoke. And we had to develop this pattern of speaking to her very slowly, like this, right? Without like
so interesting.
And our whole family dynamic had to change in terms, because she has a sister, it had to change in terms of allowing people to speak without interrupting them. Like all of these things had to happen. So it did go away with speech therapy for her, but there was just a discussion in one of my hypnosis groups online about hypnosis for stuttering. So that is fascinating. That was your first exposure to like someone who was professionally doing hypnosis. And then you went on to study it. How did that happen?
There was a long period of kind of self-study between then and actually getting trained clinically because I, of course, couldn't do it legally until I had gotten trained or until I had gone to graduate school. So
Mm-hmm.
I became kind of obsessed with it, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
At the time, there was nothing more interesting to me. And out of everything I was studying in psychology, I was just kind of intoxicated by it. I thought the idea was incredible, and I saw that hypnosis had such a rich history, and also has been a technique used in various forms for a long, long time, and also is, I think, commonly kind of either discredited or not credited at all with having been around for a really long time. So I did my own self-study, and I read I went to Barnes and Noble, I think, and got some really probably non-clinical or
Mm-hmm.
non-empirical
Right.
books about like self-help books on doing hypnosis and doing self-hypnosis as well. And so I started by at that point making tapes for myself, whether it was just
Mm.
reading a script from a book or then I created my own script. So I just got really nerded out on it and, and
Uh-huh.
got into it on my own for probably that next year and a half until I would actually get trained in graduate school to use it clinically. And even before then, I did eventually go and receive some hypnosis from that same professor who had a private practice in the town. So that was my first kind of receiving from a professional doing hypnosis, which was huge, which was a huge deal and was very powerful. And it became a real part of my life at that point.
Interesting. So that experience with getting it yourself, it sounds like really cemented it for you. Like this is a really powerful technique.
It did, right? And I think for me, the same kind of applies for any clinical tool that I use, right? If I'm going to offer it to clients, I really need to know what it feels like to
Yes.
be on the couch, right? That's something I really believe in. And just to be able to describe it to clients, even, I consider it a part of my training very much. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I agree. Like one of the biggest influences on how I practice has been my own therapist and how she works with me.
Yeah.
So, in my own experience with hypnosis, in terms of that part of my practice as well. So, absolutely, I agree with you there. And particularly in not just describing to clients what it's like and knowing that I've been there and all of that, but it's like all the pieces coming together. I saw on your
Yeah.
website that you often use it in combination with CBT and in particular for
Hmm.
anxiety. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that some?
Sure. I'll kind of answer that by also talking about kind of my first uses of the method. Again, I started off by making a lot of tapes for myself, and I think that's how I learned, right? Is I would make them, some of them would work well, some of them would not work so well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would even, whether or not this is legal or ethical, I would make them for friends. So I would have friends who were really interested in it, and I would even barter that skill with others.
Uh-huh.
There was a guy where I wanted to learn music theory for guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was really interested in hypnosis, and who's not really? Like,
Yeah,
people have questions even if they're not interested in receiving it. They're like, what's that all about?
that's true.
So
Mm-hmm.
we did some bartering where he would come over and teach me music theory for an hour, and then I would do hypnosis with him for an hour. So
That is great.
yeah, when you're poor and your friends are multi-talented, you leverage that.
Absolutely. Yes. Uh-huh. I'm always offering it to friends. I'm like, we can do hypnosis for that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
let me
just
help you out
real
there.
quick one.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first clinical application for me was when I was, an intern in graduate school, my first semester of clinical work, where at the free clinic where we worked, there was a woman who had a pretty severe phobia of throwing up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking a hypnosis course at that point and had a mentor and was already kind of pushing the limits of what an intern should be doing, but was able to get him to supervise me to do the hypnosis in this setting, and was able to treat this young lady successfully all the way through that phobia in just a few sessions. I think it was 2 or 3 sessions at the very most.
Wow.
So that was a big deal for me, and seeing its efficacy and seeing that a bunch of other treatments had actually not worked for her.
Yeah, because often the fear of vomiting, I'm familiar with it because I'm also an anxiety specialist myself, and phobias will come in and sometimes it slides into OCD. Anyway, all of that. And generally fear of vomiting is a much longer treatment than 2 to 3 sessions. When you're talking about a traditional CBT and exposure and, all of that kind of protocol. And I want to define for my listeners, CBT is cognitive behavior therapy. So it's probably the most common treatment for anxiety disorders. And like John, I use it in combination in my practice with hypnosis. So that was one of your first clinical experiences with it, with doing hypnosis. And then what happened?
Well, I think, and originally I was trained very psychodynamically, working interpersonally, using a lot of kind of process comments in terms of what's happening between the therapist and the client, and how do we use that to use what's called immediacies. So what's happening in the immediate moment, and what feelings is that bringing up for counselor and client. I started to kind of train myself again in CBT this time when I finished graduate school, because I felt like I was really lacking in that area. I really wanted those tools. So I use CBT a great deal just in general, but also in conjunction with hypnosis, because I do want to know, for instance, like with the young lady with the fear of vomiting, her what ifs. I want to know the thoughts that are kind of tangled up in this fear. So usually there's some chain of kind of what ifs. So for her, it might be, well, what if I throw up? And then I might say, okay, so what would that mean, or what would happen next if you were to throw up, or how would you handle that? Well, I'd throw up and I'd be embarrassed, I'd be humiliated. Okay, and then how would you deal with that embarrassment or that humiliation, and kind of going down the chain of the fear in that way. So I think a lot of times before doing hypnosis, I like to just know what's going on, what are the cognitions that are kind of keeping this fear going and making it feel so insurmountable. Even if you do nothing other than identify them, I think it's great to just kind of illuminate them and have them there. And then also, if you want to take that information and even jot it down and use it in hypnosis, then that's a great use of that information, in addition to the other kind of more classic CBT ways of challenging cognitions and doing what's called cognitive restructuring and stuff like that. So I just think it's always good to figure out, what does the person believe, about this fear, or about their own abilities to deal with this thing that's really troubling them. So I'm always kind of drawing that out, no matter what kind of clinical work I'm doing.
Yes, like that. I think that's one of the most fun parts of CBT, actually, is that rabbit hole. Is like, is asking, all right, what are the thoughts? And if that happens, then what? And then what? And then what? And then what? And then you really do get to the fears, the motivations of someone, like what is going to motivate them then towards change that can absolutely go into a hypnosis file in terms of making that change on a different level.
Yeah.
So, I agree with you there that it's not just a process of someone coming in, and I say this a lot on the podcast, that you don't just come in and lay down on the couch and boom, you're fixed.
Yeah.
Right? Like we have to talk about what's going on for you and what are the thoughts, what are the cognitions, what are the motivations, so that that hypnosis is really effective for you.
Yep,
so then
that's right.
You said you really got into CBT at that point. I know you trained with Aaron Beck, who's pretty much one of the fathers of the field,
Yeah, for sure.
At that point. And then you came back to use the combination. When you were training with him, was there discussion about hypnosis involved in that? Or was it purely like, no, this is CBT and that's it?
It was the latter.
The
It
latter,
was,
okay.
I think people would probably be either confused or want some of their money back because people had come to this training from all over the world to get nothing but CBT,
Okay.
for 4 days or whatever it was. So, it's interesting, but if I could go back, I probably would have tried to ask, Aaron Beck about hypnosis. It's not something that he necessarily uses.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, yeah, because he's such a pioneer of the industry, that he certainly has used it at some point, I bet, or has studied it or studied Erickson or someone like that along the way. I mean, I think that's the fun part of just training in different modalities and figuring out how do I want to integrate them. What are the things that I always have in my back pocket versus what are the things that I seldom use. I think we've all kind of like been to a training or done something where it's like, oh, that was interesting, and then years later it's like you've never kind of used it.
Yeah,
So that
definitely.
that
Yeah.
that happens. I think hypnosis at the very minimum can be really powerful in getting people to relax and let go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also, my clients will hear me say something like this, but I really see hypnosis, mindfulness, guided imagery, meditation in the same family of techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what makes hypnosis is largely the insertion of a suggestion. I think, but the state, and even the state of the brain when they're doing brain scans for these different techniques, it looks very, very similar, right? The brain is in this beta
Yes.
wave state.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can get on my own soapbox about how mindfulness is very in vogue right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, hypnosis can be kind of forgotten, or we can forget to acknowledge the deep roots it has in our field, and how it's benign. It's nothing scary to kind of be afraid of, but also is just so it just has some really deep roots in what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so useful on a practical basis. I think people don't often get that about it.
Yeah.
That it is very similar to mindfulness. It is similar to meditation. It's a little bit different, which I have an episode. I'll put that in the show notes somewhere. What are the differences between meditation and hypnosis?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But they're both very useful, and hypnosis
Yeah.
can be useful on a daily basis if somebody wanted it to be, just like meditation. So I know you do a lot of practice consulting for other psychologists and licensed counselors in practice.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use the clinical skills that you have in guiding them?
Yeah, I would say the coaching I do with therapists around developing their business is maybe 50% technical. Like, I need to know how to build a website or do Google AdWords or SEO or whatever it is, right? Or develop a business plan. But I think the other half is absolutely the emotional part and kind of the personal part, where I think we have to overcome these barriers within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of therapists that I end up working with where it's kind of like with our clinical work, a client will come in and say, my problem is X. And you'll start and you'll try to work on X, and then you'll realize, and maybe you'll both realize it's Y, it's something else, or it's in large part something else, and we have to kind of look at that part before we can go back to X. And that's the case a lot of times with therapists, where we have to look at, okay, do you believe you can do this in the first place? Have you actually visualize being successful in private practice? When you visualize, let's say, fielding a phone call with a new client, what does that bring up for you, right? How do you imagine that going? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as confident, reassuring, booking that appointment, getting that person in for, let's say, your full fee, if that's important to you, or are you nervous, and does that convey to the client or the potential client in that phone call? So there's a lot of work that we do just to untangle all of that stuff and go, all right, before we move forward with any of the technical stuff, let's make sure that you really see this thing going well and kind of see it in your mind's eye, whether it's something like a phone call with a client that maybe is tripping you up, or even the big picture of like, do I believe I can or deserve to be in private practice?
Mm-hmm.
Or to make X amount of dollars. That's, we do talk about income a lot and trying to hit different goals that will afford you the lifestyle you want. Because I think that's what private practice is really all about, but we sometimes lose sight of that. So there's a lot of that kind of looking inward work that we do. And sometimes it surprises therapists that we end up having to do that because they think we're just doing business coaching, but it's so important to kind of clear some of those blocks before moving forward.
Yes. So you're working on the deeper beliefs that sometimes people aren't always aware of. And then also the practical side of, all right, here's the deeper beliefs. Now, how do we clear them and move forward with this?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And set our goals,
Yep.
Income goals, practice goals, service goals. I know there's a big piece of service for, I don't think I've met a therapist where service isn't a big piece, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like, how do you balance that with having to support yourself and support your family and your kids and all of that?
Sure.
So, do you use hypnosis sometimes as a piece of that? Like, would you see that as useful? Like, hey, there's.
I think it's extremely useful. I wouldn't say that I use it explicitly, but it's really common for me when I'm working with a therapist. And let's say they come in and they're really frenzied. There's a lot going on. There's billing issues. There's staffing issues. My marketing's not working. And we're human and we get frazzled. Mm-hmm. I might not call it hypnosis, but I might do something like, okay, so there's all this going on, and I might reflect back. These are the issues. It all feels like a big emergency right now. So I want you to just stop. I want you to put down your pen. I want you to take a deep breath, and I want you to just notice your breath and kind of start there. Mm-hmm. And I'll change my voice, and I'll really slow it down, and I'll kind of use my hypnosis voice or some version of it, again, without really saying, oh, let's do 90 seconds of hypnosis. Right. And I'll just slow it all down, and I'll kind of modulate what's going on in them by using my voice, mm-hmm. by slowing down, mm-hmm. by just noticing the breath, mm-hmm. And just kind of pacing people like that. And, and if you want to let the eyes gently close, let them close. And then you might let the shoulders go, just little stuff like that.
Yes.
To let it all settle down, right? And sometimes that's enough to go, all right, and as you come back out of this, I want you just to be able to look at what's important right now. Mm-hmm. And it might just float to the surface, right? They might go, okay, I need to take this weekend off. Or it might, again, it might be something that it's less conscious, it's more deeper level. But mm-hmm. if you really slow down, sometimes those answers can come to you, right? It's all about the power of the unconscious. And a lot of times therapists, they know what to do. They know even what they're not doing. They just haven't done it yet. And something's getting in the way, or they're getting frenzied in their conscious mind and just kind of, being too spread thin by a lot. So when you really slow down, your unconscious can really give you the answer a lot of times. And then what I do is just affirm that. So it's like, okay, so after slowing down in this moment, you realize I need to take this weekend off, or I need to spend, Saturday with my family. That's a big deal, right? Yeah. And then I just like for people to work. When we're working together, I want you to be calm. I want you to be as calm as you can so that you can think clearly, so that you can think sharply and not be in this kind of panic mode and in the kind of fear part of your brain. So I really use it to regulate people. And so again, the voice is the biggest tool for that.
Yes. And I'm hearing it's regulating, it's centering them, and then it's guiding.
That's right.
So it's both of those pieces that come forth for you. Well, I know you've launched another business as well recently. You're a very busy man.
Yeah. I know. I need to slow down more myself. I need someone else using their hypnosis voice with me.
Right. We're near the end of the interview, but I wanted to make sure that you have an opportunity to talk about that one as well.
Yeah, thanks. So through my coaching, I realized, over these years that on one hand, sure, some therapists, they want to learn the technical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back, the biggest ones are Google AdWords and SEO, or search engine optimization. So how high your website ranks on Google. But in large part, therapists just want someone to do it for them. But we get priced out by bigger marketing agencies and we don't know who to trust.
Mm-hmm.
So I created a separate company called Unconditional Media of digital marketing specialists who do this stuff for therapists day in and day out. And they already knew how to work with these platforms. And this is the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that they eat, sleep, and breathe, just like we do with therapy. And so, this team will work with you to basically boost your online presence and do all the digital stuff that most of us don't know how to do. And why would we, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just love doing it, right? It's a nice complement to, again, the kind of personal work and the growth work and the coaching that I do. And also saying, okay, if you want to just hand this stuff off and be relieved to be able to hand it off rather than taking 6 months to learn it yourself,
Mm-hmm.
or we could do it on Thursday in 6 hours. We're just giving therapists that option now. So we love working with therapists. They have a great team. You can check it out, www.unconditional.media. There's no .com, so just unconditional.media.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love helping therapists.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a product at one point called SEO in 30 minutes because I could teach anyone to do SEO in about 30 minutes was was a thing. Like I had taught people to do it, but what I found is that they didn't want to do it. Like they didn't
Yeah,
even want to
it's
do the
interesting.
30 minutes that it takes. I mean, really, my theory was that it takes about 30 minutes a week to really reach the number
Sure.
one spot of Google. And that had been my personal experience with several different companies and
Sure.
friends. But it's like, no, they didn't want to even do that part of it. It was easier for them to hand off. And
Yeah.
and I think part of that too is a growth process for people saying, okay, I don't have to do everything myself. It's okay to
Yeah.
not want to do that. Like it's okay to pay somebody to do that piece and not have
Yeah,
to worry
that's
about
right.
it. Like not even
That's
have to
right.
think about on Fridays I have to do this blogging or whatever it is that they choose to
That's
do,
right.
the posting
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I had a
Sure.
very similar experience in terms of people wanting to hand that piece off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not for everyone. It's some people, yeah, it's great if you want to learn it, if you enjoy that stuff. But for, I think most therapists, it just drains you. It's just overwhelming. And I totally get that. So,
Yeah, that's true. For me, it's more like a game. Like,
yeah, well, that's good. That's a good way to see it.
because I came more from, I had a whole nother company that I marketed, and it was always a game to me to hold that number one spot on Google, and all the different techniques for it. And it's like, how can I beat Google? But a lot of people don't feel that way about it. It's just a drain on them, right?
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you can you tell the listeners?
I love that, seeing it as a game.
Yeah,
Great.
it's totally a game, right?
So many other games I'd rather play.
Yeah, right. For a lot of people, that's true. Yeah, like they don't want to play that particular game. They'd rather go play Monopoly with their kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell people your other website as well? The one, your private practice consulting. And I'll be sure to put all of these in the show notes as well.
That'd be great. Awesome. Yeah. So my consulting work is at privatepracticeworkshop.com. And yeah, I've got online courses and coaching, masterminds groups, and my own podcast there. So it's all about, being better business owners and running a more efficient business. And again, clearing those kind of personal blocks so that you can really, really succeed. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And that's an easy way to get in touch.
Great. And I do want to tell the listeners that you have a wonderful podcast that has this very grounded, laid back vibe to it. That's different than, a lot of business podcasts are. They feel more high energy even,
Sure.
That whole
sort
of business vibe, quote unquote, but yours feels like grounded, practical. It's a really nice podcast. So
thank you so much. Appreciate that a lot.
Give that a listen if you're interested in that. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
interview with John Clarke. I really loved hearing about how he uses his training in terms of working not just with clients, but with other psychologists, therapists, counselors, wanting to grow their private practices and accessing some of the blocks that happen there. I think everyone pretty much agrees that there are some absolute advantages to being self-employed when you're running a private practice, as well as some disadvantages. And I see that he really comes from a place of service for people and trying to help them figure out, like, where are the blocks here? Where do you need to focus? What do you need to do to really be of service to people? And I also loved hearing about his new product. I'm such a geek around SEO and Google. I just followed that field for a really long time. So it's always interesting to me when people come up with good services in terms of that. Like, how do we help people be more efficient and not have to do all of that if they're really not interested? He is offering $50 off a Google AdWords or SEO package from his new company, Unconditional Media. And all you have to do is just reference this episode. This is episode 54 when you contact him about his services. So I'm happy for all my listeners to get that benefit. Also, before I go, I want to let you know the episode that I was talking about, the differences between hypnosis and meditation, is episode 28. It's a little mini episode. It's not long. It's about 5 minutes or so, but it really talks about the differences there in more depth if you're interested in that. I also want to say that if you really love the podcast, please give it a rating and review on iTunes or whatever player you're on. I know I say that in the outro, but I just want to say it personally here. I also absolutely love hearing what you want to see in an upcoming episode. Maybe you have a question about hypnosis. Please email me and let me know that, or let me know how an episode affected your life. I love getting those emails. I love hearing that the podcast makes a difference for people. You can email me at drliz@drlizhypnosis.com. That's DRLIZ at drlizhypnosis.com. All right, people, have a wonderful week. Peace. If you like this episode, do me a favor and rate, review, and subscribe on whatever player you like, or even better, tell a friend so that more and more people learn about hypnosis and how it can be helpful for them. If you want to know more about me, head over to drlizhypnosis.com. That's DRLIZ hypnosis.com. You can see the downloads and see if there's one that's helpful for your life. Or you could also join the newsletter and get a couple of free files, as well as lots of good content. I've written a newsletter for well over 10 years. Go ahead and subscribe and join the rest of the world. All right, people, have a wonderful week.